Hello, welcome to the OSU Sports Extra podcast. I'm Patrick Prince, joined as always by OSU beat writer Kelly Hines. And this is the, what is this, Kelly? Wednesday, October 5th edition. So let's talk about what you saw in Waco over the weekend. A lot of people are high on the Pokes. It was their first big road test. They passed with flying colors. They moved up in the polls. Mike Gundy said he was very impressed with the response of his team, and he wasn't sure how it would go with some of the inexperience. What do you make of what you saw in Waco?
I thought that was such a good win for this team at this point in the season, when, as you mentioned, not tested to that point yet. And I don't think we really knew what we were dealing with this team until you go on the road. I think that just reveals so much more. So to be able to control most of that game and kind of weather that weird third quarter when a lot of different stuff happened, and to have big special teams moments, have the defense play well, and offense kind of have a validation type moment with a goal line touchdown. I just felt like so many good things happened in that game, and that really gives you some confidence moving forward because it's going to be a wild ride in the Big 12. So I think just getting that confidence that comes with a road win in conference play. I have a kitten biting my toes. It's so great. I love that for me. I think that was just like, it went really well, and there was some adversity during the game, but they managed that really well. And you gave up some big plays. That's going to happen in Big 12 play. But just being able to bounce back from that, I thought that was just really impressive.
So tell me if you think I'm making too much of this, but I thought it was real interesting when Spencer Sanders threw that interception, after having interception issues last year in 2 games against Baylor. He seemed to handle that interception really well. He didn't, he's kind of gotten down on himself in the past, but he didn't do that. He at least he didn't seem like it. Did you notice the same thing, or am I making too much of this?
No, I thought that he responded exceptionally well to that, because with all of the talk about what happened in those games against Baylor, you wouldn't want that to get in his head too much, because a lot of that was out of his control, tipped passes, hit while throwing, things that happen. And he obviously responded well to that game in December, and then went out and helped OSU win the Fiesta Bowl. But still, that was a big narrative going into this game. How is he going to handle that? And then to see him have a miscue and be able to immediately go back out and recover from that on the next drive. I thought that was a really important step for him. As impressive as it was like a good moment for him, because he's a guy who typically is very confident and very comfortable, and all of the things that you want in your starting quarterback. But you just wondered how that was going to go for him if something bad happened. But he's so mature, and he what happened last year was, I don't think that was really characteristic of him. It just weird things happened in that game. So but I thought it was still a good moment. I think maybe we make too big of a deal out of everything, but that's what we do.
Yeah, fair enough. So let's talk about Tech this week. They, true in Tech fashion, they like to throw the ball around and throw it a lot. You got to figure the number one storyline will be their passing offense versus OSU secondary. How do you see that breaking down?
Yeah, I think that honestly, it's like reminds you of why the Big 12 is so strong, when there's like a big storyline with every game. It's like, how are these going to match up? And it's like a really intriguing matchup. And I think that's how it's going to be, again, this week. I thought that OSU secondary played really well. Obviously, when you have interceptions from Thomas Harper and Jason Taylor, that's great. I mean, they hadn't had interceptions. The defense hadn't had an interception since the first game, so that was really good to see. But I think that was just another sign of this this secondary, really the whole back seven, just coming together and really just having that cohesion that maybe wasn't there in the first game. Like that's not okay. The kitten coming. That's something that took some time. It was just a matter of time before one showed up for adoption. It took some time to get all of that together, but I feel like it's still trending in the right direction. And as we've seen, that's not easy when there's a little bit of not struggle. Please don't eat that. Let's not eat that. Anytime there's anything that doesn't go according to plan, like it could go one of two ways. I think we've seen that with some of our other teams recently. Like things can get better or it can get a lot worse. So just seeing how much this defense has improved since the first game, that's been really impressive. And it's not surprising given Derek Mason and just his enthusiasm and energy and really just the leadership that they have on defense. But to see those guys buy into the process of, we haven't had a ton of experience and we need to get that. And there may be some minor growing pains, but we're going to work through that. That's kind of what makes college football enjoyable. So like that whole journey of a season, regardless of how it turns out, like that's why we watch the games. That's why they play the games, because you don't necessarily know how it's going to go. But seeing just how those guys, it's not like I know them especially well, just seeing their confidence on the field is a different vibe than it was in the first game. And I think that's that's a big storyline for this week, but for any week. I think your secondary is going to be tested most weeks in the Big 12, probably every week. But obviously when you're going up against a team that throws it like 60 times a game, you're like, okay, yeah, we probably need those corners to be on top of it. But obviously that's really important for this week.
So their quarterback, Donovan Smith, threw it 56 times versus Texas. He threw it 48 times versus Kansas State, and he threw it 58 times versus Houston. So yeah, this is
60 is a slight exaggeration, but you can round up, I feel like.
That's right. Yeah.
That's throwing a lot. And that's how you get to be one of the most productive passing teams in the country. Just keep throwing, just throw it again.
Just throw it again.
Yeah, they're just slinging it around. So I mean, they have had a lot of success throwing the ball, and like obviously they're doing it because it works. But it's super obvious what they want to do, and they've been pretty good at it. But I think the way that OSU secondary is playing like that I think will be a challenge, but not something that's impossible.
Yeah. So you had a chance this week to sit down with Oklahoma State Athletic Director Chad Weiberg. You had a story in today's paper. Anything interesting in that discussion that didn't make print today?
Oh man, we talked about a lot of different stuff, and that was kind of the what I wrote about OSU's national brand status kind of was the biggest takeaway that I had. But I asked him, because we hear all the time about how college football is just about money and all of the decisions are driven by money. And I was like, when in a world with that, like how do you keep the focus like on the relationships and on the students and all of the other things? And he was like, we work really hard at doing that. And I mean, of course he's going to say that, but like, just knowing him a little bit, like the relationships, here's another kitten. The relationships are what matters to him. And this is so cute.
Oh, that's a cute one.
Little one that was like near death, like 2 weeks ago. And he survived it.
Looking well.
Anyway, but the other thing we talked about was we talked about Bedlam, because that's a thing. I mean, it's not really a thing anymore, but it's a topic of conversation. But I asked him, I was like, were you surprised about how that took off? That the whole Bedlam is dead thing, when that did recently. And he was like, I was definitely surprised by that. I thought we all knew, this is what the circumstances were, and we kind of did, but when national media gets involved, it takes on a life of its own, and we're just left to deal with that. But I felt like I specifically asked him what he thought about Mike Gundy, like, having all of those thoughts that he wrote down and what he said and all that. And he's like, I wouldn't have changed any of that. And, obviously you're going to say that to like a member of the media, but it seemed legitimate when he said that. But Chad Weiberg is very careful with what he says. And so everything he says, like, that like, if he, he would be, if he's softening what he's saying by like 50%, like what he's saying, it seems pretty valid then, because he's not maybe giving you all of his feelings on it. Like he like scales it back. So I definitely feel like what he said was true, that like Mike Gundy kind of was the spokesman for the athletic department in that moment and said, it is what it is. They made their decisions, and we have legitimate non-conference opponents like booked for like the next 15 years or whatever it is now. And I mean, like their non-conference schedule, like they have a home and home with Alabama, they have a home and home with Arkansas. I mean, like, no offense to Oklahoma, but please don't hurt yourself. Please, let's not do that. Just climbing things.
Always.
Yeah, it's an adventure. But I think their thoughts are, we've worked so hard on these long term, in the far out future, like contracts and all of the scheduling, like we can't just throw that away because somebody we thought we would be playing on an annual basis decided to go to another conference. I mean, it's not that simple. Obviously it's a little bit less complex with the other sports, but I don't know that that's something that they're really actively discussing right now, because like if I were OSU, I'd be like, y'all are the ones trying to throw us under the bus here and say that we don't want to do this. Like y'all are the ones who left the league. Like, so it's just not super cut and dry, but Chad handled all of that great. I mean, he was just like, it's what it is. Like we have our schedules set for like a long time, so we aren't in a position to move anything else around to accommodate them.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. And that's a good point about scheduling. It's not they probably couldn't do it without canceling contracts. They couldn't do it anytime soon if they wanted to in football.
I mean, because like you would have to like remove someone from your schedule, like because you probably aren't going to like play like you wouldn't want Alabama and Oklahoma in the same year. So like pretty much every year they're going to have like a pretty good opponent, and they would have to remove somebody to make room or schedule it for, gosh, I mean, they have Nebraska and Colorado like so far in the future. I don't have the schedules in front of me, but like they would have to like schedule it for like, well over a decade from now. And who knows who's going to be in what conference at that point. Like it's a scheduling issue, I think, at this point. Like
I would like to see the other sports try to do it. I mean,
yeah, I think that's realistic. Maybe not for like, you maybe wouldn't see that for men's basketball. I don't know. I think that it doesn't, a lot of that isn't that decided by the coaches, don't they, pretty much? Whereas like for football, it's like, oh, these are the situations that are going to appeal to us for tickets and for TV, and like there's so many factors that go into it. Especially when you're trying to when you have like 3 non-conference opponents and you're trying to figure out the best combination of those, whereas, and that's scheduled so far in advance, whereas your non-conference opponents for the other sports like probably on a somewhat annual or every 2 or 3 year basis. So I think you will see it. I think it makes sense in most of the sports because of the proximity, because the travel is a little bit different, for sports that aren't men's basketball and football. You're probably looking for more regional opponents. Like I think that makes a lot of sense. So I would be surprised if that doesn't happen. I don't know at what point that's determined, but I don't think there's going to be like this whole thing from OSU to all of its coaches. We don't want to play them in anything. Let's not schedule. I don't think it's going to be like that. I think it's going to be like, you guys make your schedules and we sign off on it. So do whatever you want to do.
All right, this is one of my favorite questions to ask. It's a pretty simple question, but I love asking it. Let's go back to the field for a second. Who are we not talking about that we should be? We as fans, media, football followers, who are we not talking about that we should?
Putting me on the spot.
Put you on the spot.
I mean, I think what Tom Hutton does is so underrated. We still talk about it quite a bit though. So he's just, I had never talked to him before yesterday. He's kind of what you would expect when he's, 32 years old. And as someone pointed out, Braylin Presley, the younger Presley brother, downed that punt. Just perfectly executed that. But like the difference between like Tom Hutton's age and Braylin Presley, like Braylin's like probably like 18 and Tom is 32 and married and but he said this is definitely going to be his last year. He was ready to move on with his life, move back to Australia, but he was really impressive. He came across to me like a professional player, because not just because of his age, just how his approach, like he's not just like this 19, 20, 21-year-old who's trying to figure out life and playing a sport and it's a good time, and it's just different. It's with Tom, he's a lot more serious, but still like not like overly serious. He's just professional, and not that the other players aren't. It's just different when you're talking to a 32-year-old. You're talking to like an adult. So what he does is pretty amazing. That's such a unique skill that like the amount of work that's gone into it to be so good at this level. And obviously all of that is attributed to a lot of work, not just by him, but by the whole special teams unit. The punt coverage has been great. But his story is obviously a little bit unusual. I know we've written about him quite a bit, so it's not like he's under the radar, but you get so used to seeing him do what he does that I'm not gonna say it's not still impressive, because it is, but you're so used to it that you're like, oh yeah, that was a great punt. Like spin on that, everything about that was perfect, but you're like, that's what he does pretty much every punt. So, but after talking to him a little bit, like I just was even more impressed with him. So that's been my pick.
Fair enough. So he's going to move back to Australia following this year?
Yeah, he has a degree in like construction management, and he's got he's ready to move on. I think he accomplished something, even though the season is not even to the midway point. Like he's really pleased with how his career has gone, and I think that he's just ready for that next phase of his life. He said he and his wife want to have settle down and have kids and do the adult things or whatever. But I think that was kind of expected for him to not take that extra year.
Interesting. Okay. All right, we'll leave it there for this week. We appreciate you joining us. You can download us for free on Google, Apple, or Spotify.
Gosh.
We're giving it away for free. We're nice like that. Kelly, appreciate the knowledge as always. We'll catch up next week.
Sounds good.